Heartily welcome all of you to the first edition of Economic Times Eye on AI Dialogue. We're here to discuss one of the most consequential issues of our time, which is sovereign AI, trust, control, and risk in an autonomous world. I'm Himanshi from the Economic Times, and I'll be moderating this discussion. First of all, I would like to welcome the guest, Mr. Sriram Raghavan, who's leading the Software Innovation Labs at IBM India. He also leads product development and software engineering at IBM in India and for the world. Mr. A.S. Rajagopal, MD and CEO of NxtGen Cloud Technologies. He is a veteran of the data center and cloud industry with over 3 decades of experience in the space. NxtGen, his company, is also participating in the India AI mission. Ms. Priya Kashyap, she is the Chief Operating Officer and the Chief of Staff at FinCorp. She has more than 25 years of experience in the BFSI sector and has led many verticals across operational transformation. Just as introduction on the subject, at a time when agentic AI and autonomous systems are really embedded in citizen services, lending, enterprise workflows, there's a lot of question about data sovereignty. And basically, where does sovereignty start? Does it start at the model layer, the chip layer? And how can organizations manage enterprise systems at this time? So I want to open the floor with a very generic question. What does AI sovereignty really mean for enterprises at a time when we are really dependent on foreign technology for the chip layer, for the model layer, and also for cloud services? So maybe we can start with Mr. Sriram. What are your thoughts on that?
Thank you, Himanshi. Again, a pleasure to be part of this panel and to join this conversation with you and my esteemed co-panelists. So I think that this is a great place to begin because, as you said, both words in your question, what does AI sovereignty mean? And in fact, what sovereignty means on its own are very nuanced discussions. And I don't think it is possible to have a binary discussion. So I like to sort of try to break that down a little bit into, as enterprises think about building their solutions, their use cases, their applications, they have to look at it from levels of control and optionality. So to me, sovereignty really translates back to what are those elements of my technology decision, the stack, the models, etc., where I have control and optionality and where I am locked in. And I think that's a very important lens by which you think about sovereignty. So as you look at that problem, number one, we at IBM we've been thinking about sovereignty in 4 pillars. There is obviously data sovereignty, but even data sovereignty goes beyond just the data of the actual applications and the customer. It is all the data generated in the process of running the system, from the logs to the telemetry to the decisions of the model. So bigger data universe, what does it mean? Who has control? Do I have control? Do I have access to the keys? Who else has access to it? That's the data sovereignty discussion. Then there is the technology sovereignty discussion, which is the technology that I use to build and run my AI applications. How much flexibility do I have to change it? Is it based on open technologies? Can I switch vendors? Can I move one to another? Or am I locked in at different layers of the stack? I think that's an important element of technological sovereignty. Then there is operational sovereignty, which is this stack that I'm using to run my enterprise AI. Am I responsible for running it and operating it? Am I working with a service provider? If so, which country entity is the service provider part of, and therefore that will determine the laws that come into play. And I think the last part, going back to your original phrasing, AI starts to add another lens, and which is why we think of that as a 4th pillar, because now you are in the business of taking decisions, making material business decisions based on the output of AI. So then AI sovereignty gets into governance, control, and understanding of which models are being used for what decisions. Can I inspect it? Can I reason it? Can I understand the decision-making process? I think that. So to me, all of these 4 dimensions are important. And maybe we will have the further discussion, but I think it's important to recognize that it's going to be on a spectrum. Looking for a 0-1 answer to sovereignty, I think, is impractical, as you said, because this is a complicated technology stack and enterprises have to put this together. from multiple piece parts.
Absolutely. Yeah, right. I agree with that. Mr. Rajagopal, for the longest time, sovereignty, data sovereignty has meant that, your data should reside across local boundaries. Help us understand how has that narrative changed with AI and what does data sovereignty at large means?
We've been talking about sovereignty for a long time. That's how we design everything, we build everything at NxtGen. So data sovereignty is just one piece of the whole thing. I mean, what we try to do is, can we try to define sovereignty for ourselves? I mean, so we have a very simple term internally. What we say is that, am I being dependent on somebody's terms? I mean, this is a simple thing, simple question that we want to ask ourselves every time we do. That resulted that we needed to have independence or control over three aspects. One, of course, is over our data. The second thing is my operations itself. I mean, like, is my operations going to be dependent on somebody to enable me, or am I self-sufficient? Can I serve myself without having other terms to be implied on it? And the third aspect is, do I have good access to technology? And I have control over the technology that I work with. So the good part that happened for us over the last maybe 3 years is that we've been forced to look at leveraging open source big time. So that actually enabled us to solve the layer of software pretty comprehensively, both in terms of not just the traditional application stack, but if you see the stuff that's available in open source for leveraging AI, is we have amazing options on the open source world. And of course, India is building certain things. So in terms of getting there, in terms of software related sovereignty, I think we're very, very confident. Now, where are the areas that are important for us to look at is what we are working with IBM and Red Hat is to, how do we establish governance, auditability, these aspects on our operations, so that my customer tends to get comfort over whatever we are doing. And we truly tell them that, they are operating on their terms, I mean, not on some terms that we do not have control over. That's how we are seeing it. But the domain is pretty, I would say, suffocating for us these days, because we are battling very large capital that is being deployed, and obviously that access to capital is a pretty critical element for us. Geopolitics does play a role. I mean, we all know when we what is happening in that area. Technology, I explained. I mean, the more we own the infrastructure, the more we leverage open source, we are able to exercise access and control over technology space. The other aspect that we are really working hard is to build talent base, because we don't have the big talent is actually going away from being available to service providers like us. I mean, because people get paid very well and they have a good opportunity to work on great tech outside. So this is where we are trying to leverage our partnerships with IBM, Red Hat, and other companies which can afford this kind of talent. So our battles are slightly different now, but I think we are on a firm footing in terms of where we are going. We believe that we have sovereignty. We need to now work on governance and accountability and auditability of the models.
Right. I think Mr. Rajagopal touched on a very important point on we need to control the technology that we're deploying, right? Ms. Kashyap, help us understand how is Hero looking at the sovereignty aspect? I mean, as an organization which really handles some of the most critical financial data of customers, how does Hero look at sovereignty?
So essentially, what sovereignty means to us at Hero is that, quite like how uh, Rajgopal has described it, you must have complete control over things that are important to you as well as to your customers. So I'm going to answer your question a little bit more from the business side. Now, our reality is that there's a lot of customer data that resides with us, and apart from emphasis of the regulator, etc., it's very important that we have complete control over the data that we have and over the models that we deploy. And by that I mean is that what sovereignty means to us is that our data, our models, as well as our talent should be our own, which means that there is complete accountability for what we do And there's complete accountability for the outcomes that our customers see because of the AI that we deploy. So, from a business aspect, that's really how we are looking at it, is that there has to be accountability, ownership, and the IP of data, models, as well as talent should reside with us and not be external to us.
Absolutely. Mr. Sriram, I want to come back to you. You touched upon sovereignty across the AI stack, across multiple layers in the infrastructure, in models, in governance, and across services. But organizations right now are really facing a challenge in striking the right balance there. Tell us what are the challenges and risks that companies are facing, and maybe how is IBM looking at really owning that infrastructure stack?
No, it's a great question, Himanshu. And I'll go back to one of the statements that I made, which is that it isn't going to be binary, because the reality is that you as an enterprise may not have access to every piece yourself. And this is true even broadly, right? I mean, today, we all know if you go all the way back to hardware, 40% of the world's chips are made in one country. So the notion that somehow we will have end-to-end sovereignty from raw materials to applications isn't conceivable. So to me, I think the way we, in our discussions with, I'll take two lenses. I look at what we work with our customers and also then tell you what we provide as a technology provider. With our customers, the discussion we have with them is what are the most important pieces where today control, what Raj and Priya talked about, that control and that optionality you can build into your architectural and design choices. And what are some of the layers where you must be pragmatic and recognize that today maybe you have to depend on somebody else to offer that capability. But over time, you build in that optionality. So as an example, a client today, if they are in a different businesses, they aren't going to be in the business of building AI models, AI middleware. They aren't going to run data sensors like NxtGen. They aren't going to build middleware platforms like IBM. But they can say that as I build my AI use cases, I'm going to make sure I build optionality into models so that I can switch between models. I'm not beholden to a single model. I build it in a way that I can move between models. I build it in a way with open technology so that I can switch from one provider to another provider. I work with enterprises that offer open APIs and open ways to integrate their pieces so that even if today I'm working with a certain provider of a technology, I'm not beholden to them. And to me, optionality and control go sort of hand in hand, because if you have optionality, it means you have the control to switch. So that's the conversation we have. Focus on model optionality, focus on infrastructure optionality. And IBM's strategy has always been about hybrid. So in some respects, IBM's strategy of building capabilities that run in multiple places at some level naturally leads into we are able to offer you technologies that are more amenable to sovereignty. Now, as a technology provider ourselves, what we offer to customers is optionality in terms of, look, our platforms will work with our models, but you can use any other third-party open source models, including your models. The platforms that we give you will be founded on open source technologies. In fact, our latest offering in this space called Sovereign Core, we've been very clear that all the pieces of Sovereign Core will be based on open technologies and open APIs. So that even if today you are leveraging Sovereign Core from IBM, you have the option to make different choices over a period of time or mix and match. So that's sort of the perspective that we offer both in what we tell customers and how we offer technology to meet their needs. And my last but not the least is, and this is where partnerships such as the ones we have with NextGen and so on make sense, because then we bring some of our capabilities both at the model and middleware level, then work with partners such as NextGen to say, look, here is a piece of stack fully built on open technologies that is operated by a provider such as NextGen. So now for customers in India, it gives them a base on which then they can go build their innovations on top.
Right. I think Mr. Rajagopal also touched upon this is the openness of architectures and interoperability, right? Mr. Rajagopal, help us understand, how are enterprises and even global AI labs looking at this opportunity of enabling enterprises to own their infrastructure? I mean, I'm talking about the world of OpenAIs and Googles and Anthropics. Are they working with cloud providers like NextGen to enable enterprises to be able to own their data, their architectures within the local boundaries? What's happening in that space?
We are pretty wary of what's happening in that space because there is a underlying act that we need to be sensitive to, which is called US Cloud Act. There are other regulations like FISA, which actually force any global player operating out of US to actually store and data to US. I mean, and now two other countries are party to US Cloud Act, which is UK and Australia. So I actually don't talk to my customers to be dependent on technologies that are being brought in by OpenAI, Anthropic, and others. But wherever we need, we can always leverage them. They are pretty general purpose. But when we are actually working with certain domain specific things like domain adapted models in finance or HR or wherever that which or customer service, I think we can build very strong use cases with open source models, and that's what we've been doing. We've delivered 153 use cases to various enterprises in the country so far, and all built on top of domain adapting a open source model. So to answer your question, we are not encouraging our customers to actually leverage Anthropic or or any other model that's available. One of the reasons being that we went through this in a hard way that we have learned. I mean, so we were actually Asia Pacific's largest cloud provider for VMware. But what happened? VMware randomly took some decisions, actually, for me, they doubled the cost. Certain terms changed. These things were not comfortable for us. I mean, see, it's not that you can pass on all the cost to the customer. So when you lose your ability to exercise your own terms, I mean, in a partnership, I think we need to have an optionality, which Sriram mentioned. I mean, that resonates very well. I mean, that as long as we have an option available, I think we can switch. So, so I have been advocating to my customers that not to be dependent on such technologies where finally, the terms are not yours, but terms are theirs. But I also want them to understand that there are certain regulatory obligations that they operate under, which will dilute the way, even if their intent is good, they may be forced to compromise your position in terms of your control and on your data and stuff like that. So so that's what is critical to understand. I think it's become a position where who controls intelligence. I mean, and that's how they are driving it. I don't think we should give in to that. We should today build your own stuff. I'm not saying that we can build very complex models for drug discovery and all that. Even there are very good models. But for most enterprises today, we can really work on a fully sovereign model to actually work on even on customer premise and with absolute control over what it is doing. So I think I've explained my position. I mean, I don't want to encourage usage of these global frontier models.
Understood. But just to follow up, like, is that a practical approach? Because, openness today is also sort of, there's a question mark. I mean, just yesterday we saw the Chinese government is talking on pulling the plug on exporting their open source models to the world. I mean, they were the champions of open source until now. So, if we don't have a fallback option on even open source, what is the way forward for us?
So, so I want you to look at it like this. I mean, even Meta started with open source, and they pulled back from that. I mean, this is bound to happen because as open source models have become very, very close to the frontier model performance, which we have seen across many of the models that are available, the choice is still there. It is not, of course. I mean, China built very efficient models and new ways of actually building a model and all, and we all are able to leverage it. It is true that sometimes, I mean, this is where, we lose control, right? It is not the intent of the Quen, the companies which are building the Quen and Kimiketu and all that. It is government who's taken a decision. So I think what India is doing is it is very well aware of this situation. And that's why if you see the India mission where we started building our own models, it is true that we may be late. We may not have a frontier model capability yet, but we've already started that angle. And a lot of the tasks that we can do for customer support and other aspects, we actually leverage Indian built models because they have very good language capability because in India we need to serve at least 22 languages to actually be able to serve the country fully. So best way is to leverage Indian models, and we have quite a lot of choice there. So I think what is happening is, while some of the countries may lock down, or some of the companies like Meta may lock down on open source initiatives, but it will not stop. I mean, we are, in fact, along with IBM, we are part of an alliance called AI Alliance. It's a global alliance. I mean, and we are actually, the alliance is actually looking at building a global open LLM, which leverages talent and data from across the world, and it is intended to beat the frontier models, if not, be at par in terms of its performance. So there are initiatives. I don't think open source will actually be a limiting factor, because if you take any of the largest of deployments, it all runs on open source. It doesn't run on closed source models. Election Commission, which we serve, it run it entirely on open source. So I don't think that will be a limiting factor, but there will be situations like certain controls, exerted by China and other aspects. But we need to be wary. It doesn't stop the open source movement.
Absolutely. Sure. I want to come to Ms. Kashyap, and touch upon the regulatory aspect, because just the wonderful work that RBI has done with their latest model risk management framework, how's the BFSI sector looking at the latest guidelines from RBI? Do you feel that they have struck the right balance between innovation and regulation? How's Hero thinking about it?
It's absolutely. So many times, my experience has been, now I've been in the industry, in the BFSI industry for almost 30 years. And right from when I started, there's a regulation, and people struggle to comply. But often the experience has been that, when you look back and connect the dots, RBI many times, and especially now in the last 10, 12 years, they've been thinking ahead. So regulations are made well in time. They may be difficult to comply with, because there's a cost of compliance always that companies have to bear. But I think they've struck actually a very good balance. And since this is pretty new to most companies and expanding very quickly, it's very good to have a governance framework that companies can really follow. So I think it's a great balance. And while at the outset it may require a lot of work for several companies, however, I'm sure it'll be very useful in the long run, because we ourselves at Hero have been focusing a lot on governance and compliance in terms of AI, and it's not been a very easy subject. So right from, I think Sriram mentioned accountability. So right from how do you hold people accountable? So the model may do the job, but the responsibility stays with the human. And at the outset, how do to pin that accountability is extremely important as you start to scale all of this. And I think the other important thing is, and part of RBI's perspective as well, is that you can only drive fast when you can have the ability to apply the brakes. And what I mean by that is that you can only go ahead with the launches if you have the ability to pull back without having an impact on the business. It's extremely important. So in all our launches, we are ensuring that we have the ability to apply brakes and switch to any earlier alternative models that may have been in play. Um, so essentially, I think RBI struck a very good balance, and I also think that as we go live with several business outcomes that are increasingly looking, lucrative, exciting, they're customer centric, etc., etc. They're enhancing speed of delivery to the customer. They are, so as we go ahead with implementation across several areas of the business, enhancing our collection efficiencies and things like that, it is very important to wear the governance hat, understand the risks, put accountability in place, and have the ability to apply brakes and change.
Absolutely. I think I was reading upon here of FinCorp and how really the company has mastered the human plus AI model and governance first approach, right? Mr. Raghavan, I want to come back to you and really zoom in on the owning the infrastructure part that you talked about, right? But enterprise from an enterprise perspective, there's a heavy cost associated towards owning the infrastructure and all the layers that you talked about, especially with AI, given how expensive the GPUs and the related infrastructure to it is. How do you think clients are thinking about it, and what is IBM's guidance on that part, managing the cost efficiency?
So it's a great question, and I think Himanshi, maybe I'll add color to it from a couple of lenses, right? So one, as I said before, one of the ways you get a handle on the cost is actually by building optionality into the way you build your application. So if you are beholden to a certain model and your application will only work with that model, then you are subject to whatever that model costs today, tomorrow, day after, forever. If you build optionality, then you have the luxury to say, look, I'm still building the application. I'm going to choose a different model. And what we have seen, as Raj was talking about, is consistently smaller models continue to up the bar on what you're able to do. What a big model that was 3 times large was able to do in 6 months, a model that is 1/10, often 100 the size, is able to do. And if it's your use case that matters, you don't need that model to do everything that the biggest model does. That's one way to have control over the cost. The second aspect of control over the cost is to have flexibility in where you do the deployment. So in some cases, you may actually find that owning the infrastructure, running the models is most efficient. In some other cases, you will want to work with managed service providers. Some cases, you may want to mix and match your own hosted model with models with service providers. And you may say, for the very, very special 1%, I'll actually use a frontier model because it really gives me the capability. And that is where you manage the cost. And as an example, our own example, we have recently released our coding platform called IBM Bob. We developed it internally ourselves. And one of the design points of IBM Bob was multi-model management. As opposed to letting every developer decide what model to use for every task that they were doing, we said, you are going to be isolated. You describe what you need to do. And our system, Bob, will decide for what you need to do, what combination of models are going to be used. So then I have the luxury to constantly switch things around, go to cheaper models, etc., manage the cost. So I think that's a second. Third is interestingly enough, I think there is a lot of technological innovation to be done to squeeze out cost. So as a very concrete example, actually working jointly with NxtGen, we showed that using open source technology, if you know your hardware footprint, which was multiple different GPUs of different kinds, you have a certain model that you want to optimize. In case this was a India-built model from one of the startups in India. We actually showed that you can squeeze out a lot more than you otherwise thought it could. So I continue to believe that the costs will come down because there is so much innovation happening that such partnerships such as these will enable. So I'd say 3 vectors: build optionality at the application level so you're not beholden to a model. Continue to work with built-in systems such as the example I gave with Bob, where you do a same use case with multiple models so you can constantly move cost around and as technology gets better. And last is, I think, recognize that as long as you work with open technologies and open models, there is so much innovation happening that these costs are going to come down. And we are seeing that every day through some of these collaborations.
Right. I think this is one of the most important challenges that the companies are facing. Even global companies. I mean, we've seen what happens with what is happening with token bill shocks right now. So
it went from the hottest thing to now it's the bad thing to do in a matter of a month and a half, right?
Absolutely. In the interest of time, I just want to throw a quick last question to everybody. If there's one priority that India must get right to achieve AI sovereignty, what do you think that should be? Mr. Raghavan again.
So I would say continue to invest in building your own models. As we recognize, I think it's important that is not a race that India decides not to do and say we will only become users. I think it's very important to have that. It adds optionality. It makes sure that you are developing models that speak to the use cases, the languages, all of that you're going to need. I think that's going to be really, really critical. And I would add, continue to invest in infrastructure. I think the steps that the India AI mission has taken is very, very positive. I think that's going to be continued to be important, because without infrastructure, the innovation in the country will not have the platform on which to be able to go deliver value. So I would say those two I would be continue to be important to do.
Mr. Rajagopal?
I mean, I would resonate what Sriram said. It is infrastructure, because we don't have infrastructure to build models now, because we are woefully short. And whenever we deploy, there are actually three contenders for that GPU. So it's become I mean, we ourselves are, trying to pick and choose as to whom do we work with. So I think genuinely believe it is infrastructure. We've made progress on models. We are making progress on governance. It's evolving. I think when all these models and all this will be applied to business use cases, we need to have infrastructure to run it, and I think that is where we need to really focus on improving the availability of infrastructure in India.
Right. Ms. Kashyap?
So I agree with what's being said, So essentially it boils down to data, models, talent, and compute. And, you can't create a very fancy appliance and then put it in someone else's socket. So you've got to create that, and I think India is very well aware of it. And I hope we can, achieve complete AI sovereignty by having the ability to have complete control over all four.
This is the best anecdote and takeaway for us. I mean, the socket example. Thank you so much for saying that. All right, we've come to the end. I'm really honored to have all of you distinguished guests at our panel. I hope you enjoyed the discussion, and thanks once again for making time.